The 1970 Chevelle SS 454 LS6 is the story of a car that briefly held the most powerful engine General Motors ever put in a street car. It was more brutal than the Corvette, more devastating than the Camaro, and wrapped in what most people considered a sensible family sedan. This was not just the king of the streets. It was the last great roar before the muscle car era died. December 9th, 1969. At the Baltimore assembly plant, a worker scrawled two phrases on a build sheet that became automotive legend, pilot job, and if it had wings, it would fly. He was building the very first LS6 Chevelle ever assembled, and those words turned out prophetic. This car could practically fly, and in just 1 year, the 1970 Chevelle SS 454 LS6 redefined what Americans expected from their automobiles. For most of the 1960s, General Motors lived in fear. Not fear of their competitors. They owned nearly 50% of the entire automotive market. They feared something much more terrifying: the federal government. With monopoly concerns looming, General Motors executives made a series of conservative decisions designed to keep their company from being broken up. One decision was a corporate ban on any engine larger than 400 cubic inches in their intermediate and pony cars. This policy created an artificial ceiling that frustrated engineers and customers alike. While Chrysler dropped 426 HEMAs into everything with wheels, and Ford experimented with massive 429s, General Motors muscle cars were artificially neutered. The Chevelle, Camaro, and GTO had to make do with 396 and 400 cubic inch engines. Impressive engines, but not the fire-breathing monsters that lived under Corvette hoods. But by 1970, something changed. Maybe it was competitive pressure, maybe executive hubris, or maybe someone finally realized that keeping your best engines away from your most popular cars was plain stupid. Whatever the reason, General Motors lifted the 400 cubic inch ban for 1970, and all hell broke loose. Chevrolet wasted no time. They had been developing the Mark IV big block for years, and the 454 cubic inch version was already proving itself in the Corvette. But the LS6 variant was something special. A take-no-prisoners version that made the already impressive LS5 look tame. The numbers tell the story. The LS6 cranked out 450 horsepower at 5,600 RPM and 500 pound-feet of torque at 3,600 RPM. But those were conservative factory ratings, designed to keep State Farm and other insurance companies from paying attention. Most experts agree the real output was closer to 500 horsepower, making it not just the most powerful engine in the Chevelle lineup, but the most powerful engine General Motors sold to the public. How do you make 500 horsepower from 454 cubic inches? You start with an iron block featuring 4-bolt mains and deep skirts for strength. You add a forged steel crankshaft and connecting rods that can handle the punishment. You top it with forged aluminum pistons that squeeze the mixture to an 11.25:1 compression ratio, a number that makes modern engineers break out in cold sweats. Then you get serious about breathing. The LS6 breathed through specially designed cylinder heads with 2.19-inch intake valves and 1.88-inch exhaust valves. Air and fuel arrived via an 800 CFM Holley 4-barrel carburetor mounted on an aluminum intake manifold. The camshaft was equally aggressive with 316 degrees of intake duration, 302 degrees of exhaust duration, and 80 degrees of overlap. These were not the gentle hydraulic lifters you would find in your grandmother's Impala. These were solid mechanical lifters that announced their presence with an unmistakable symphony. The LS6 was expensive. On top of the Chevelle's base price of $2,719, customers had to pay $503.45 for the SS 454 package, Then another $263.30 for the LS6 upgrade. Add in the recommended M22 Rock Crusher 4-speed transmission or the optional Turbo Hydromatic 400 automatic for another $221.90, and you were looking at nearly $1,000 in options. Many buyers also opted for the ZL2 cowl induction hood, which added another $147.40, but gave the car its iconic, aggressive appearance. All told, a properly equipped LS6 Chevelle pushed $5,000, which was serious Corvette money in 1970. But customers didn't mind paying for performance, especially when that performance was genuinely devastating. Motor Trend tested an LS6 Chevelle in December 1969 and watched it demolish a Plymouth Roadrunner 446-pack and a Ford Torino Cobra 429. The Chevy hit 60 miles per hour in just 6.0 seconds and covered the quarter mile in 13.8 seconds, more than half a second quicker than its competitors. The standard Positraction limited slip differential ensured all that power reached the pavement with maximum efficiency. Hot Rod Magazine's test was even more impressive. Publisher John Diana managed a best time of 13.44 seconds at 108.17 miles per hour, while CarCraft squeezed out a tooth-rattling 13.12 seconds at 107.01 miles per hour. To put that in perspective, these times were competitive with the legendary 426 Hemi Cuda, which managed 13.10 seconds at 107.12 miles per hour, despite weighing significantly less than the Chevelle. The driving experience was unlike anything most Americans had ever encountered. This wasn't gradual wheel spin that you could modulate with a careful right foot. The LS6's torque hit like a sledgehammer, breaking the rear tires loose instantly and without warning. Getting one off the line cleanly required mechanical sympathy, careful throttle modulation, and what one contemporary tester called a silent prayer. But the LS6 wasn't just about straight-line performance. Despite weighing between 3,800 and 4,000 pounds depending on body style and options, the Chevelle handled surprisingly well. Motor Trend noted that, nurtured by the evolution of the Z28, the Chevelles, even the big ones, dart like whippets through the tightest turns. This was a car that could embarrass sports cars in the corners and humiliate them on the straights. Chevrolet built exactly 4,475 LS6 engines at their Tonawanda, New York plant during the 1970 model year, and every single one went into Chevelles. The breakdown included coupes, convertibles, and even a handful of El Camino pickups. Experts estimate that about a dozen convertibles and a similar number of El Caminos received the LS6, making the convertible version one of the rarest production muscle cars ever built. Those production numbers might seem substantial, but they represented just a tiny fraction of total Chevelle production. Out of 53,599 Malibu and El Camino models built with performance packages, only 8,773 received the SS 454 treatment, and of those, just 4,475 got the ultimate LS6 engine. The LS6 Chevelle represented something unique in automotive history, a family car with 450 horsepower. While the Corvette was obviously a sports car and the Camaro was clearly a pony car, the Chevelle was fundamentally a practical mid-size sedan that happened to have the most powerful engine General Motors made. Parents could, and did, use these cars to haul kids to school and groceries from the store. The fact that they could also obliterate most purpose-built sports cars was just a bonus. This split personality made the LS6 Chevelle particularly appealing to a generation of buyers who wanted performance without sacrificing practicality. You could not put a child seat in a Corvette, but you could in a Chevelle. You could not haul plywood in a Camaro, but the Chevelle's trunk was enormous. Here was a car that could play responsible family transportation Monday through Friday, and transform into a tire-smoking monster on Saturday night. But the party was already ending before most people realized it had started. Federal emissions regulations were tightening, insurance companies were cracking down on high-performance vehicles, and fuel quality was becoming less consistent. The high-compression engines that made the muscle car era possible required premium fuel that was getting harder to find and more expensive to buy. Car Life magazine seemed to sense the end approaching. After testing an LS6, they wrote, "Without even raising the specters of insurance and social justice, it is fair to say that the supercar as we know it may have gone as far as it is going." They were right. The LS6 option was supposed to continue into 1971, but it was canceled in May of that year after just 14 engines had been built and never installed in cars. The 1971 Corvette did receive a detuned LS6 with lower compression and reduced power, but it was not the same animal. Compression ratios dropped across the board to accommodate lower octane fuel. And by 1973, the mighty 454 that once made 450 horsepower was rated at just 275 horsepower. The muscle car era had effectively ended. Today, the LS6 Chevelle stands as perhaps the most valuable of all muscle cars. At Barrett-Jackson's recent Scottsdale auction, a convertible version sold for $770,000, setting a new public auction record and proving that collectors recognize these cars for what they really were: the absolute peak of American automotive performance before reason finally prevailed. Less than 10% of the original 4,475 LS6 Chevelles have been located and registered with the LS6 registry, making survivors extraordinarily rare. The combination of relatively low production numbers, brutal performance, and historical significance has created a perfect storm of collectability that shows no signs of abating. The 1970 Chevelle SS 454 LS6 was not just a great muscle car, it was the muscle car. It represented the moment when American automakers finally said enough to corporate conservatism and federal hand-wringing and built something purely for the joy of going fast. For one brief, shining moment, you could walk into a Chevrolet dealership and buy a family car with 450 horsepower and a warranty. That moment would never come again. Emissions regulations, insurance pressure, and fuel crises would soon transform the automotive landscape into something more responsible, more efficient, and infinitely less exciting. But for those lucky enough to own an LS6 Chevelle, or even just to hear one start up on a Saturday morning, they experienced something that can never be replicated. The sound of America's automotive innocence ending with a 454 cubic inch roar. The worker who wrote the line, "If it had wings, it would fly," on that first build sheet could not have known he was describing not just one car, but an entire ERA. The LS6 Chevelle did fly, carrying with it the dreams and desires of a generation that believed more horsepower was always the answer. When it finally came back to earth, the muscle car era came with it, never to return.